I'm Swami Svatmananda. Had a very varied and colorful life. I started as a person who was not very keen, let's put it that way, on people who looked like me and wore these colors. So I was very much into hardcore sciences. I got 2 engineering degrees and then got into the business world and the development world, and long story short, I was trying to find the meaning of life, and somehow I ended up meeting my guru, who then changed my life, and here I am. Okay. So today we're going to talk about yoga and beyond yoga. Now, when you guys saw that title, you guys knew the title, right? What did you expect I was going to talk about? I mean, just different. It's interactive. We're having an interactive session too. I think you'll gain more out of that. What did you expect? Just some wild thoughts. It's not a wrong answer, by the way. So.
More about the philosophy, really, sort of outside.
Right.
The bigger picture.
The bigger picture, yeah. How many of you are beginners in yoga asana? Right. And the rest of you have been doing yoga for a while? Okay, how many of you have been teaching yoga for a while? Okay. So the reason why I came up with this topic was because I've met a lot of yoga teachers who've been teaching for about 5 or 10 years, and they come back and they say, what else is there? We need to know what else is there. Can we find, is there something beyond that? Because, you know, what happens is when you come to these yoga festivals, you learn a lot about yoga, you learn the different styles, you learn all the different techniques, and you get really excited, and you go home and you practice, and after a while you actually even teach that, and after teaching a while, then it kind of gets old. And then you start asking, now what? And in some teachings that you go, you hear about having these enlightenment experiences. It's like, if you do this, then you get samadhi. You have this nirvikalpa samadhi. And it's so elusive that after years of practice, you know, it seems to go farther away than getting closer. And then you ask yourself, well, I've studied all I need to know about yoga. Now what else do I do? Oh, then you can come to Vedanta or try something else, and the journey continues. So I thought this would be something that we can talk about, but let's talk about it and understand yoga from a framework that it was meant to be understood from its source. In Sanskrit, the word yoga, or every word in Sanskrit, has a root meaning. You know, the problem with English is that we can have a word, but that word can have a different meaning depending on the context. The way that word is placed in the sentence can give you a completely different meaning because of the sentence it's in. In Sanskrit, we don't have that problem. In Sanskrit, every word has a root meaning, which is the core meaning of the word. And that word then gets modified by the prefix and the suffix that you add on. You know, let's say in painting, when you have 7 colors, you can paint any painting, and when someone sees that painting, you can appreciate it or not. But you see a painting, it's nonetheless a painting. And we've heard that when you look at a picture, it represents 1,000 words, something like that. You've heard that before, right? In Sanskrit, you can paint a picture from the scratch, And as you speak, you're creating a picture. That's the elegance of the language. So I could be making up Sanskrit words, and as long as you understand the root meaning of words, I make up words here and you would understand it. You don't need a dictionary. Yeah? And that's the elegance of the language. So, I'm sure when I say yoga, most of you know what it means, right? In Sanskrit, do you know what it means in Sanskrit? Okay. The root word for yoga is yuj. Y-U-J. Now that yuj really can be used in many different ways. And we use the term yoga beyond just the asana. Asana means the postures that you're familiar with. So I'll give you the first meaning that is used generically. Well, actually, three meanings. So the first meaning is basically what you do. You go to a yoga class and you do your postures and so on. So that's the general meaning that we have today. The definition of yuj is to yoke. Yoke is English, it's not Sanskrit. Yoke, what does yoke mean? To bind. To bind, to join. Now, when you bring two things together, when you join two things together, you want to identify the two separate things as one. And so you give it a name. I'm talking about the second meaning. I'll come to the third meaning. So the second meaning is when you bring two or more things together in a group, in a bunch, or just two things, you can say that is a yoga of that thing. Now, the example I give is, let's say one of you guys come to these conferences and you learn the word after this class to join things, and you are really into fast food. And you want to be creative, you want to create a new fast food chain. And instead of going to McDonald's where you get a burger, fries, and a soft drink, you come up with a healthier version of it. And you say salads and a healthy drink, actually, which I have there, and and something else. And that combination, you call it a yoga. Why not? You brought two or three things together, so you say yoga 1, yoga 2, a combo. And actually in fast foods, you do have combo 1, combo 2, combo 3, right? So instead of using the English word combo, you want to be more like branding and more sophisticated. You say yoga 1, yoga 2, and then you go down to this fast food and you say, okay, I picked yoga 3, right? Nothing wrong with it. That is yoga. In fact, in our tradition, yoga is used constantly. In astrology, we have certain combinations of planets. We call it a yoga. In Ayurveda, we have combination of different things also. That is also called a certain yoga. You know, a yoga is simply bringing two or three things together to actually identify it as a purpose. Yeah. That is the second meaning. The third meaning of yuj, to yoke. When do you use a yoke? When you have, I'm working on the third meaning now, which is basically if you have two beasts, two bulls, and you want these bulls to pull this chariot or cart, you need to put a yoke on them so they can work together. Bulls are stubborn. They're difficult. And how do you make them work together? through a yoke. We get it? Clear on that? In yoga, essentially, if you're doing asana, what are you yoking? That's the question we need to ask. If you say you're yoking two postures, that's not quite yoga. So what is the real meaning of yoga then? What are the beasts that we want them to work together? So when we really examine what yoga is in our tradition, is that we're trying to synchronize three beasts that don't normally work together. The first one is your body. We're trying to recognize and organize the body so that it can function with the second beast. And what do you think the second beast is? The mind. The mind is the hardest beast to control. But if you can control the body, you can try at least, to control the mind. But you see, when we say someone is a yogi, it's not because that person is a yogi because they can perform pretzels with their body. Yeah. Yeah. The idea of calling someone a yogi is when they can control their body and mind and spirit together. Yoking in yoga means three beasts working together in harmony. Functioning in life in harmony. Bringing the three things together, synchronizing them so they can work and live in harmony. These three things, we're not talking about the rest of the world. If you can bring these three things to function in harmony, then you're a yogi or a yogini, a female version of it. But just because you can do pretzels with your body, I call you, this is the term that I define as the great asananista. That's as far as you can go with that. But what exactly are you doing to control your mind? Meditation is certainly helpful, but it's not the answer. Yoga, we know what it is, right? Asana. Asana by itself doesn't work. Asana works well if you eat right. And even when you say if you eat right, what does that mean? And if you've been attending Parthasarthadiji's class, you know that eating right is actually eating within the right seasons and the right times. What you've put into your body makes a huge difference in how your body performs. So, yoga asana is essential when you combine that with right living and right eating. And right there, we're only simply talking about your body. What do we do with the mind? In Ayurveda, we also learn that the mind is made up of what you eat. Your body is made up of what you eat. So, certainly, what you eat affects your mind. But then, what else can you do to address your mind? What have you guys discovered so far? Any feel free to share if you know how. I suppose you guys have been doing something with yoga to control your mind, right?
Self-aware.
I'm sorry? Focus on your breath. That's great.
Meditation.
Right. What else? I'm sorry? Observe, right. That's one of them. Mantra. That's great. What else? Good. So we have mantra, breath, meditation, self-knowledge, acceptance. I'm trying to look for something that is really there for the mind, and that's exactly what I want to focus on about in this class today is like get you to see that there's something else to control the mind. Knowledge.
Ethical observations. Like
Right. Right.
Practice.
Okay. Great. So you see, what's interesting is that in order to control our mind, mantra is useful, meditation is useful, pranayama is certainly very, very important. But by the way, to do yoga, you need pranayama, because to even control your body, you need to do pranayama. So it's not just asana without pranayama. In fact, it's very difficult to do yoga, asana, without doing it, without focusing on your breath. Okay, if you're not using your breath while you're doing asana, you're doing half-baked yoga. Okay, so do find out how to do that. Breath is really critical for yoga asana. But it's even more critical for the mind. But what are the techniques we know that helps us pacify the mind? Because we cannot really control it. Hold the breath out until you're blue. Right. And then you pass out. Yeah, that works. But breath is really important. I'm sorry? Self-discipline. That's actually one key factor. But how many of you actually heard of Patanjali Yoga Sutras? Right. What does it say in the first verse? You guys know it. You can say it. Come on. Right. Chitta vritti nirodha. Okay. Simply said, the first verse of anything that is defined in our tradition actually tells you what the purpose of that teaching is. So, if I come to a class and I say, today we're going to learn on this topic, you know that that's the topic we're going to be talking about, right? I need to state it in the beginning of the class, right? So it's the same thing. The Vedic tradition or the ancient Indian tradition was an oral tradition. So we need to understand that it was not literal, so the way you approach the oral tradition is very different from the written tradition. In the literal tradition, what we have is the introduction, then we have the body of the knowledge, then we have a conclusion. Right? If we read a book or an essay, we always look at that. Even the talks, sometimes we do that, is like in a talk, I might have an introduction on body and I'll conclude in the end. And that's when you know the talk is over. I mean, sometimes I don't do that, but typically when you go to a lecture, that's how it goes. But then when you're talking to your friend at Starbucks, is that how you talk to your friend and say, hey, I'm going to tell you something, but I'm going to do the introduction, and I'm going to do the body, and I'm going to do the conclusion. Then only you can speak. And so please pay attention. Is this how you talk to someone in Starbucks? No. You have a conversation, right? And you develop your story in that conversation. So oral traditions, if I was going to teach something in an oral way, I needed to actually teach by using building blocks. So I'll talk about a topic today, right? Tomorrow's class, I'll build up on what I talked about yesterday. And the next class, I'm going to tell you what we're going to talk about the following day. So if I talked about a topic yesterday, I have to connect it to today's class, then I have to connect it to tomorrow's class. So there's a brilliant way in Sanskrit where you do that. If I'm starting a new topic, I'll start a new topic. But if I'm continuing a topic, I'll say, like in our classes, I'll say today, when I say today, we are going to talk about this topic. That meant that yesterday I was talking about something else. Today is a continuation. Are we together? And when I conclude today's class, I will say at the end, tomorrow we're going to talk about the next topic. So in an oral tradition, if you're trying to talk about building a spaceship, I'll have to start somewhere and build up the basis to get to you actually understanding the entire way to build a spaceship. So in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, is just one, by the way. He starts out with ataha. So the term ataha has 2 or 3 different meanings. The first one, if you really go deeper in an esoteric sense, it's a prayer. But what ataha means in Sanskrit is now. That's the same thing as today. And when you see the term ataha in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, what that tells you, it gives you a clue that there is something preceding it. It's not the beginning of the topic. It's not where you begin. There is something that you need to know before you come to this topic. And those of you that know about Patanjali Yoga Sutras, how many times did he actually refer to postures? 2. 2. And what postures are you specifically talking about? The only posture he talks about is Sukhasana. Right? What is Sukhasana? Sitting in a comfortable, with your straight back. Now, what has that got to do with anything else? So what you see, he starts out with, now, let's talk about chitta, vriddhi, nirodha. Pacifying, nirodha is actually nir, which is to negate or remove, but you can't really remove. Vritti are thoughts. Chitta is in the mind. The thoughts that are dwelling in your mind is the topic we're going to talk about today. So when you talk about Patanjali Yoga Sutras, this has really nothing to do with yoga, asana. Now we find a lot of books about it, but what it refers to is how do you control your mind? Because that's very clearly, it states that right from the beginning. Chitta vritti nirodha. How to pacify would be the right word or the right translation. How do you pacify your mind? And then it goes on to list 8 different ways, 8 steps rather, to actually deal with it. Now today's topic is not Patanjali Yoga Sutras. What we're doing today is to actually contextualize the yoga asana in its place and its usefulness. The asana practice is very useful for the body, for the physical body. The mind can be pacified in many ways, which includes meditation, mantras, and many of the things that you guys talked about. But there has to be something else that gives us direction and a teaching to help us pacify our minds. And we find, although there are many, many different ways to do it, one easy way, one clear way that we are familiar in this culture is Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And all that it does is tell you how to deal with the mind, so you can bring it inward, you can bring it more focused. Now look at the sequence. In order to have the ability to focus and pacify your mind, you first need to address your body. Because if you cannot address your body, you cannot deal with your mind. You deal with your body first, then you deal with your mind, and Patanjali Yoga Sutras is one of them, one of the ways that you do it. When you are ready with controlling your body, controlling your mind, then we deal with the spirit. Now, when you can control your mind, when you can control your body, then that gives you the preparation for you now to address what is the spirit. Who is the spirit? Who are you? What makes you you? But if you cannot control your body and cannot control the mind, how are you going to be ready to know who you are? Assuming you can control your body, assuming you can control your mind, what is it that teaches you what your spirit is? In our Vedic tradition, to know who you are, to know what you're made up of, at the end of the Vedas is where you find a body of knowledge which is called Vedanta. Have you guys been to Swami Svatmananda's talk this morning? How many of you been there? Oh, good. Right. So when you are there, what he talks about, what we talk about in this tense, is really about Vedanta, and that deals with your spirit. Now, in order to really understand Vedanta, you need to have a place in your mind to be able to process the words of the Upanishads. You can only process the words of the Upanishads if your mind is rested, if your mind is not outward, if your mind is not busy. I use an analogy of how you work through all of this. So if you're a farmer and you want to grow food, you come across a land and all it is a dense, thick forest. You come to this forest and you have your great non-GMO seeds, which you've spent a lot of money for, and you think if you take these seeds and just spread them in the forest, you think your food is going to grow? It's not. So what do you need to do? You have to uproot the trees, clear the land, fertilize the land, prepare the soil, till the soil, and once you go through that entire process, then you're ready to plant the seeds, right? To really be a yogi or a yogini requires us to do those things. When you prepare your body, when you prepare your body through eating right and doing doing the asana, that's the preparation of the body. When you prepare the mind, you're clearing the mind so that seeds can be planted. The seeds that can be planted are the words of the Upanishads. When a teacher plants those words, which we call in Sanskritam Shravanam, that is to hear. So you have to remember that these seeds are the words that gets planted into your mind. When these words gets planted into your mind, these seeds have to germinate in your mind, not the Guru's mind. Because the Guru has an understanding, the Guru has the knowledge. But the question is, how does it convey to you so you get the knowledge? If I retain the knowledge without transferring it to you, then I'm not teaching. If I'm getting into mystical experiences and magic, that's not helping you learn anything. But learning can only take place if those words are sown into your mind, into a fertile mind, and from there it grows. But for the seed of those words of the teacher that goes into your mind of the Upanishads, it can only germinate if you have a fertile mind. When it starts germinating, when it starts growing, then you start getting the fruits of that labor. You start getting the vision of the teaching. And tomorrow I'll be talking about the vision of the Vedanta. So that vision is what you will see, not the teacher. See, this is the big difference between mysticism and learning. In learning, you are the one, the student, who gets to see the vision of the teaching. And what is this vision that we're talking about? The vision is about you. Who are you? That's what Swamiji said this morning. In order to know who you really are, you have to have a mindset, you have to have a prerequisite. We cannot enroll into a PhD program without going to a master's, without going to doing, here in the US, I think A levels and O levels. And before you even get to O levels, you still have to go to primary or elementary education. Likewise, in order to get this vision, we need to go through those processes. Why do we need to go through those processes? Because the vision of who you are is Tattvamasi, meaning you are that. What is that? I'll get more into it tomorrow, but the end point is that everything is one. So the vision of this oneness that exists without a second is, how is it that I can be one with Hitler or with Saddam Hussein or with someone who has kidnapped my child? How can I be one with that person? In order to come to that understanding, to know who you are and to see the oneness in everything, because this is not based on a belief system, it's based on actually knowing and understanding, without a doubt, you need to have a mindset that is ready and prepared for this. And that preparation requires you to understand how to control your mind. Patanjali Yoga Sutra is one of them. The other one, another one, just to give you an example, is learning how to do karma yoga. And karma yoga is not about volunteering. It's not about free labor. It's about your attitude in life. How do you deal with day-to-day challenges? I think I talked about it in the last two times, I think, here. So in short, I won't get into that, but karma yoga is really about your mindset. Your mindset. How to be okay with everything. How to be okay even though the weather is bad. How to be great even when it's sun shines. How to be okay when things are falling apart. That's the mindset. That means you're not disturbed emotionally, mentally, physically by external events. That's the attitude. But in order to be able to get to that attitude, you also need to prepare the body. So what we consider a yogi in our tradition is someone who can manage and control the body, someone who can control the mind, and one who can control both the body and the mind, which we know through so many different ways. Then we come to the understanding or the teaching of Vedanta, which then tells us how to understand who we are and how to see who we are in the context of everything else. This is the general or the broad perspective. So part of why this festival is here is to actually encourage you guys to move on from asana, to understand how to deal with our minds, and then to also understand who we really are. That's why Sarva Priyananda came in this morning. We are here, and I think even a lot of the talks that are happening in this tent, that's why it's called the fire tent, is really to kind of bring that whole knowledge together. Having given you this perspective, I know there might be a lot of questions now, so I'll open the audience. I'll open to questions and be happy to answer them if you have them. And if it conflicts with anything you've known so far. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that in order to deal with, once you've done your body and you've done the food and the asanas, you then have to go to the mind. You can either study the sutras, because there it tells you that, or study karma yoga, because that will also tell you the same. So it doesn't matter which you do, the result is that you will be able to.
Yeah, has everyone heard her or? Okay. So if I can rephrase your question again, is that she's wondering whether if you do Patanjali Yoga Sutras or Karma Yoga, you can do either or. Have I rephrased that correctly? Yes. The answer is yes. Patanjali is one aspect, and if the dates are right, if we know it right, he came about in just 8 AD, somewhere around there. You can argue maybe it was 8 BCE or something like that. It doesn't matter. It was just, a few thousand years ago. But then if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, which was about approximately 4,000 years or something like that. Do you guys know? Anyone? Anyway, it was in Dvapara Yoga, which is, I would say, about 4,000 or 7,000. I don't know the exact date, but it's way, way, way back when. Krishna talks to Arjuna, who is about to go kill his family members in a war. And what does he tell him? He tells him, yes, you need to go fight. Why? Because you need to, this is your duty. But he just doesn't say this is a duty, because that's also a misrepresentation, because that was his role in life. But how do you go fight a war where you annihilate your family members, your loved ones, your guru on the other side? Because you see, the war between in the Bhagavad Gita wasn't that Arjuna was fighting a war against his enemies. These were his family members. On the opposite side, there was his guru, there was his teachers, there was his uncle who raised him, nurtured him, had him, who played on his lap, who made Arjuna who he is. So how do you convince a person to go fight a war with people that you love? And he decided that he can't do that. He didn't want to live in a world where he sees his loved ones gone. But he was caught into that situation. He had no choice. So Lord Krishna then teaches him how to have a mindset in order to be able to understand what he has to do. And Krishna teaches him two things. One, karma yoga. And he said you need karma yoga to prepare yourself in order to understand jnanam, which is knowledge. Well, it took a while. 18 chapters later, he got it. And he said, fine, I'll just go do this. And he did fight the war. But you see, when our lives are in duality, I'm speaking, you're listening, that's duality. Our entire experience is duality. The question becomes, how do we reconcile that error? Swami this morning talked about looking inward. Remember the tent man. How do we see that tent person as one with everything else? And he did a brilliant work to negate the koshas. Remember this morning? By negating the koshas. So you negate and you go back and you start getting even more subtle and subtle. But it really, to start processing and understanding these teachings, one needs to have a mindset to really go and think about it. This is the second stage of teaching, which is mananam. To understand what it really means after you have heard it, which is where the germination process starts, and then eventually getting to a place where you get to see it. So Patanjali Yoga Sutra actually is talking about withdrawing of the senses, focusing on the mind, getting the mind ready to go inward. But he doesn't tell you where, because in the end he takes you to samadhi. And he leaves you there because that's the next topic. He doesn't talk greatly about it. Now, what happens is modern authors go on and make up stuff to explain that. The mind needs to be managed. There are many ways, and one of them is Patanjali Yoga Sutra. But if you do the karma yoga, your mind gets adjusted. Because what did I say karma yoga was? It was an attitude adjustment where you can deal with problems and still be okay. You can deal with issues of life. It doesn't say that you want to get rid of issues of life. It's about managing life in a way that you do not get disturbed. You can handle it. It doesn't mean you're not emotional. Of course, we're human beings, we're going to be emotional. But it's a question of dealing with it in a practical, objective way. And if you can do that in an objective way, then what happens is when you hear those words, it assimilates easier. It makes sense. Otherwise, it's just verbiage. Yeah, go ahead.
I think my question is around this dealing with life expression, which sounds really like inspiring and simple at the same time. And I think my question is about how to honoring this call to turn inward in a way
Yeah, and that's why. Okay, so yeah, I'm trying to address your question, and I'm looking at how do I do this in a short time. So, this is a perpetual question we all have. It's like, I need to do this, but I'm spiritual, and I need to focus on this area. But how do I manage these things? We all go through this. Now, attitude adjustment is really like, I'll use an example. Bend it like Beckham, right? I mean, any football player that kicks a ball, let's say there are two teams playing, and they come to a final match, and they draw, and all that's left is the goal kick, right? And so they're the goal kick, and this guy is sitting there, and he's about to kick the goal, and he knows that if he kicks this goal right now, the game is over and they've won. The problem we have in life is that I'm standing there to kick the ball, but I'm not focusing on the ball. My mind is all over the place. I'm thinking about, oh my God, what will happen if we win? So my dreams are taking me to, I'm going to be so famous, I'm going to meet the Queen, I'm going to be invited to Buckingham Palace, I'm going to make a ton of money, and I have this girl that I'm interested in, and finally I get to go on a date with her, and and so what's happening is that the clock is ticking, and you haven't really focused on the ball. Then he switches back and he says, oh my God, what happens if I lose? Oh, I'll lose my job. I'm going to be the worst player because everyone will blame me for actually losing the game. I'll be kicked out. That's it. My career is gone. What am I going to do? I have kids. Need to put them through college. Can't do that anymore. At this age, how can I go play anymore? You see, in life, that's what we do. Karma Yoga is not about projecting or thinking about the future or the past. It's about focusing on the ball right now. What are you doing right now? That's one part of Karma Yoga. To kick the darn ball so it gets into the goal. Do the best you can to kick the ball. What happens in the result? The ball might go into the goal or not. It's okay. You get to a point where you are okay no matter what. Whether you kick the ball, you did the best you can, and whatever happened, happened. And so whatever happened, you're okay with it. You're not upset. Yes, it would be nice to win, granted. But you kicked the ball and you did the best you can and you're okay with the results. That's Karma Yoga. So when we apply this in our daily lives, the context in which we live in, we need to focus on the present. Of course, we have desires, we have needs and wants, and we contextualize that within our desires and needs and fulfillment, and we contextualize that within what we need to do presently. If you're a father, you've got to be a good father. If you're a mother, you've got to be a good mother. If you're a student, be a good student. And focus on what's there presently. You do not worry about the results because that is given. And that's why astrology works. You know, if you had come to my class yesterday, I talked about these predictions and results. Why does it happen that way? I mean, there's this big debate about Trump winning or losing. But if people can predict that he was going to win, then the results are given. You just have to do the best you can. And so what happens is when we deal with challenges in life, We solve problems, we deal with the problems to the best of our ability. That's it. Job done, and the buck stops there, we say in America. And whatever results happen, it's okay. You know, if you really go deeper to analyze why the results are the way they are, because there's something better, and the results are the way they are because that's not where you need to go right now. Yeah? And when you accept, you're in flow of the purpose of your life, rather than imposing your limited view on your purpose of life. So the idea of karma yoga is to allow you to be in alignment with your purpose in life, really, when you go back and you analyze that further. It's just working day to day. When you wake up every morning, there's a reason why you woke up. Challenges for that day. I go back to sleep and I say, okay, have I dealt with my challenges and responsibilities today? Not tomorrow, today. Tomorrow morning we shall see. I mean, as a Swami, I tell people I'm homeless. I don't know where my next meal shows up. I don't know where I'm going to sleep in the next few days. I just wake up and I'm like, okay, it's going to show up. And it shows up. Okay, sometimes not exactly what I want, but it's okay. It's what I'm supposed to get now. I'm okay with that. That's karma yoga. Okay. I hope that answers. I'm trying to kind of give you a quick answer on that. Yeah, go ahead.
You said before, if I understood correctly, that Vedanta is not a belief system.
Yes.
And for me, if something is not a belief, you have to have very strong and solid evidence. And
Right.
I know since you mentioned you have an engineering background, you know how solid and objective any evidence in engineering has to be. You can't just say, oh, I just read it in a book, or I believe it's like this, or I saw it once. It's very rigorous, and everybody else who does the same thing has to get the same results, no matter where in the world or in the universe.
Yes, if we all have the same minds, we'd definitely get the same results, guaranteed. But
Let me just get to my question. So, would you say that Vedanta does not require, I mean, is equivalent in terms of the evidence to engineering? Obviously, it's not the same. It's not the mind, but would you say it's the same quality of evidence?
absolutely. The short answer is, if you want to expand it, come tomorrow to my class. And that's exactly what I'll talk about. But to add on to the absoluteness of my answer is that in Vedanta, there's irrefutable analysis in knowing that we're all one. There's absolutely no shred of doubt. I'm even adding that on. That you have something. When we talk about this oneness, there should be absolutely not even a shred of doubt, let alone doubt itself, that we're one. That is what we call enlightenment in our tradition, not an experience. Now, to get more into that, let's talk about it tomorrow. I hope you're here tomorrow. And I'm not sure what time I'm speaking tomorrow. I think, 1:30 to 3, right here. Come back, and I'll give you a full explanation on how that works. Okay? I kind of have to promote my next... next. So if you really want to know how Vedanta works and what is the vision of it, is what I'll focus on tomorrow, because it is a bit lengthy, but I can only say that it is not a belief system, it is a knowing system. And the question then becomes, how do we go about knowing it? And the reason I tell you that is because I'm an engineer, and so for me, if I don't see it and understand it, it doesn't make sense. Whatever I talk about here or anywhere in my life is because I've actually confronted and dealt with it. Otherwise, I would not say anything. I mean, I'm sort of like, I grew up very rebellious. And I did not conform to anything. in my life. And so I had to see it, to understand it, to know it. And I paid a price for it. But at the end of the day, I'm really convinced because of what I see and know without a doubt.
So you don't think it's a subjective conviction rather than objective?
No, it isn't. And there's a very good reason for it. But we'll talk about it tomorrow, really. The vision is tomorrow. Today I just want to talk about the overview of yoga, karma yoga, and that, which is actually part of it. But Vedanta, really, I want to put it out there that Vedanta is something that you guaranteed know. And I talked about it earlier, that when I say the seeds germinate into your mind, it germinates into the student mind so that the student sees it, not the teacher. The teacher has seen it. And if the teacher can see it, then the teacher will make the student see it. And this is something that I've seen with my teacher. He did not teach me to believe something. There's no belief, there's no room for belief. The only room that we have in Vedanta is for you to understand. But the problem is that we don't have the right mind to understand it. Because if I talk to a 5-year-old child the concepts of thermodynamics in a spaceship, you think the 5-year-old is going to understand something? Yeah. And so what happens is that in Vedanta, just like we study in a regular school of learning, for instance, you guys speak English. In England, people speak English. But then why do they offer a PhD program in English? Why even bother get a degree in English when you speak it all your life? There is a system. And if there is a PhD program in English, you cannot just walk in and say, hey, I want to get a PhD in English, because they'll say, hey, did you do your master's? Did you do your A levels? Did you do your O levels? There is a system of understanding. There's a system of prerequisites and processes of learning that will lead you and give you the qualifications to understand a PhD level program. To understand Vedanta, there are prerequisites, and very clearly established prerequisites. One of them, in Tattva Bodha, we see that. There are 4 qualities to an adhikaritvam, meaning the qualities of a student who is prepared to understand that. Okay. 4 specific qualities that tells us what is the preparedness that a person needs to have in order to understand this. Now, if you are prepared and you have the prerequisites and the pre-qualifications and some more punya on top, some good karma on top, then you will inevitably get to see this if you go through the processes. And Vedanta has a syllabus, it has a process, there are methodologies in it to understand it. So without going through methodologies, without going through these processes, without going through the 5 methodologies, very clear methodologies, one of which we heard today. Okay, there are 4 more of those. And once you go through those processes, it helps you see it. I'll talk more about it tomorrow. But I'll rest my case tomorrow. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused. So where do the sutras sit with Vedanta?
So as I said, the sutra is to prepare the mind. It's a prerequisite
Oh, one of the prerequisites to be able to
to understand Vedanta. I'm not saying that it's the only one.
No.
What in the Bhagavad Gita we see another prerequisite, which is the karma yoga. Okay. The whole point is, as you know, the mind is the hardest thing to control and to manage. And here, when we say mind, we're also including our emotions and intelligence. Meaning that our emotions and intellect. So there's, when we talk about the mind, it's not just the brain. It's the emotional intelligence, your intellect, and your ego. All of these have to be managed well, controlled. And when you can control these, then you are ready to actually deal with the issue of duality. Because Vedanta has to go through these processes. When somebody says, you're not your body, you have to convince me that I'm not my body, because my ego is tied to my body. And I like my body. And I want my body to have fun and rest and enjoy all the good things in life. Why are you telling me that I'm not my body? And Vedanta goes through that process like Swamiji did this morning. I mean, he kind of did it very fast, but actually the whole teaching takes months. I mean, Taittiriya itself took us 9 months of working through the verses. 9 months of just one text. And there's 9 more to go, which is about 4 years. Actually, the study of Vedanta usually is 12-year program. And so you condense the 12-year program into right. Yeah. So it's very elaborate, very methodical. There's a system and there's a syllabus which one needs to go. But in order to do that, you need a prepared mind. Why is asana important? Asana is so important because you need to be able to sit in the olden days in Sukhasana for an hour without twitching, without worrying when you're next, who just texted you. Or worrying is like when I'm going to, I need to do a grocery run. When you start thinking about that, or when's my lover going to call me, when you start having those things going on in your mind, there's no way you're going to understand what the teacher is talking about. Because, you see, like today Sarva Priyanandaji said something. How do you know what he said was right? You can't believe anything I say or he said. So in order to really go through the analysis process, you have to be able to have the mindset to say, wait a minute, he said this, and then he said that, but I don't understand. Now, when you say I don't understand, that doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means that you need to clear the doubt. And this is where we have satsang. The reason for satsang is not to ask you random questions, but to actually clear these doubts that pop up. Because inevitably you're going to have those doubts. You cannot have this teaching through a recording or a book. Because in a satsang, what happens is that you have a doubt, that doubt is to you specifically, and you need to get that doubt cleared. So the teacher then knows where you're stuck. When you look at the mirror, you know where exactly you have a food crumb on your face. And if you walked around with a food crumb on your mouth, on your face, I mean, that wouldn't be so pleasant, would it? But if you look in the mirror before you step out of your house, or, if you apply your makeup without a mirror, I mean, that would be funny. So, but if you look in the mirror and you know exactly what to do, you actually then make a correction. Who is going to correct your thoughts and understanding? That's why you need a live teacher, because the teacher then reflects and says, hey, it's not wrong thinking, but maybe you kind of need to look at this way. And that's the teaching of Vedanta. So that's why a live teacher is necessary to correct. And that's why we have satsangs. The satsangs are based on the teaching that was given out. Shravanam. Once you have the Shravanam, then you have Mananam, you are thinking about it, it's not clear, you come and talk to the teacher. You clear the doubts, and once you get it, that this is the vision, you can then say, well, okay, let me live it. How do I live it? What is it in me? Can I see that? How do I see oneness in everything? I understand it, I get it, but how do I live it? Is where the nididhyasana comes in. Yes, go ahead. Sorry. Right.
But to me, I look at it more like as different paths that are yoga is like yoga for me path.
Right.
It's you to the top, and somehow that are more like independent and that are more to answer to different typology of people. Some people are more physical, some people are more mental, some people
Right.
like this or like that. And Raja yoga or Hatha yoga are for me complete path.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, there's no one path, and Vedanta doesn't I advocate one path. There are many ways to control your body and deal with your body. Many different ways, and it's not just yoga. And yoga is specific to a culture, but it's universal. But does it mean that other cultures in other times did not have ways to manage their bodies and live healthily? I mean, if you go to Africa today, you know, there is the what are they called? The bush people. They have the healthiest life. Yeah. Different cultures, and this is in the Vedas we say three things: Kala, Desha, Patra. Kala is place, time. Desha is place, and context. So every place, and which is what you were talking about, every person is different. Every person that is different need different ways, different paths, and that is okay. I just said that you need yoga, mind, you need to control your mind and your body and then to come to it. Does it mean that you cannot go straight to Vedanta without doing these things? Of course. You can go straight to Vedanta. I mean, what we say is that if you have had this other mind training in the past lives, you can get it with just one Upanishad. And does it mean that other cultures and other traditions throughout time had different ways to get this understanding? No. I mean, every culture, every time, in every other place, they had different ways to do it. The reason why Vedanta becomes a sort of a way of seeing is because of the language. The Sanskrit language, because of the way it was able, you apply that, and I talked about it early in this talk, that the way you use language is that you can create concepts and words as you speak, and the listener can understand fully what you're saying. So the language became a really useful ways of preserving and communicating. That's number one. Number two, the oral tradition of transferring it from one generation to another was critical in the preservation of this teaching. In other cultures, the oral tradition and the language were the two things that were not very conducive to preserving this teaching. But there are many ways of getting this wisdom, getting this knowing. To say that I can totally sit here without altering the state of my experience, without doing gymnastics and still see, or without doing a headstand, without seeing and I can still see the oneness, that is the value of it. Now, there are many ways to do that. And because we as humans are so different, there are different ways. And I suggested here, what I'm trying to do is talk about yoga in three different contexts. One, yoga asana is about your body. You have to deal with your mind. To deal with your mind, there is a system. And Patanjali yoga, karma yoga are just two. I mean, there's hundreds of other ways. And then, of course, the teaching is, okay, you need to understand why we are one. And to understand why we're one, I'll talk about it more tomorrow. Vedanta addresses that. Now, are there other systems? Yes, Are there other ways of knowing that and seeing the world as one? Of course. Do I know them? No. So, I'm aware that they are the systems, but I cannot teach it. But I do have a system through Vedanta to actually show it. Yeah, so yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just going on what you were talking about yesterday. If you're going to realise the oneness in this life, you're going to realise it anyway. Is that right? If you're destined to
Right.
this time, you'll just see it. Go on the path that you.
Right. We're all going to see it at some point. That's guaranteed. The question is, either you choose this lifetime to see it, or there's always another lifetime. It's not a problem. Good.
So you could work and work in this life, but it still might not happen because it's not in your astrology.
I'm sorry?
It's not meant to be. Work. If it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be.
Not true. If you're really dedicated and you work on it, if you have the right teacher, the system is there, there are some rituals to be done to help you, there is a way. But the passion, one of the prerequisites of studying Vedanta is a passion. You got to have this passion for moksha. If you don't have the passion to do it, then, it's like, oh, well, I have a class, there's a teacher here, and I'm too tired. Go watch a movie instead. You don't have passion. Passion is, the teacher says, I'm going to be teaching this, and you drop everything to be there, to the extent you can't. Emergencies, other situations come in, that's different. I met my teacher, and he said, well, go to India and study. Had a very comfortable life, just packed up in a few days and went to a monastery full of snakes and scorpions. Spent 3 years there in a completely different culture, context, and I don't even speak the language. It was no fun.
You continue feeling that passion. You must have times where you thought, what have I done?
No, you go through that. That's human. You go through that, but then you see what happens like any pursuit. You lose heart in it. You have tremendous challenges. There's a lot of stuff that comes in the way. But the passion is what keeps you going. Passion, circumstances, a lot of that stuff. But in the end, when you actually get to see it, here's the thing. If you really get to know who you are, nothing else matters. There is that result, but the immediate result is that you become so content of your life. Vedanta doesn't change your life. This vision of oneness does not make things better. Really. The only thing it does, it changes your attitude that it doesn't matter what happens. You're cool with that. You're unaffected. My guru used to say you become Teflon to all the challenges in life. Nothing sticks. Yeah. You get thrown crap, just slides away. Yeah, and that's the edge. So you see, we're all looking for happiness in the wrong places. But what if, let's say I give you a guarantee and I say, if you do these things, you will be happy. And happiness is not really about being happy, because if you're pursuing happiness and you want to be blissed out all the time, then you can do drugs. It's a lot easier. But if you're trying to be content and be content at all times, be okay at all times, it doesn't matter what you're going through, then Vedanta is certainly the way to do it from my experience. I mean, I said this earlier. I said I'm jobless and I'm homeless. Not that I can go out and get a job. I don't know where my next meal is going to show up. I'm not sure where I'm going to sleep. And I'm okay with that. Can you do that? Right. Vedanta teaches me how to do that. And I was doing it before I became a monk. You say, oh, well, you're a monk. Everybody knows they're going to feed you. No. In fact, you might get arrested before you get fed. So, so depending where you are. But because of Vedanta, what happens is that you see the oneness in everything, that you're okay with everything. You just recognize the transactional value of what's going on. But to get there, we need a mindset. We need the right mindset. And in order to get the right mindset, we need to have the ability to be rested, that our body's okay. When we say Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, what are we doing? We're asking that our bodies do not fall ill. I can sit and listen. Because the oral tradition. I mean, today we're not, I can't really, I have arthritis and all that, so, yeah. But to be able to sit and listen, so that one little thing that a teacher might say, you got it. Because the way we teach, sometimes we put in some words there that you might just go over your head. But if you're paying attention, it's like, wow, that was the key there, which I just missed. So. We got 10 more minutes. I can entertain a few more questions. Yeah.
In the teachings of Vedanta, if you become the Jivanmukta, the living liberated, are you then free from the cycle of death and rebirth
Right.
throughout this life?
We just heard a question from an advanced Vedanta student. Right. Who are you studying with?
Just myself.
Oh.
I've got teachers that
Right.
study yoga, CrossFit,
All right. So what she just asked is about what we call in Vedanta Jivan Mukta. So here's the thing, is that when you get this vision, I focus mostly on, and we as teachers, we focus on the immediate benefit. But have you guys watched these late night commercials? There's something that they're selling, and then, they'll say, but wait, there's more, right? So I tend to do this when it comes to the Jivan Mukta question. So what happens is, yes, the immediate benefit is how you deal with life, and how life doesn't affect you immediately. But when you get this vision in this lifetime, you can get it at any time. What happens is, when you get this vision, is what we consider in Vedanta that you have gained moksha. That means liberation. Liberation, when you say liberation, that means you have to be bound. You have to ask yourself next is, what are you bound from? You're bound by your ignorance, and you get liberated from that ignorance. Because all of our problems in life is tied to our ignorance. And when you're liberated from that ignorance of who you are, is the definition here. The ignorance is specific to who you are. If you can overcome the ignorance of who you are to know, to realize who you truly are, that's the enlightenment process. That is what we call, or this Upanishads will say, you are a Jivan Mukta. Now, what happens when that? Do you suddenly feel exalted and wear multiple layers of malas with really big naughty ones, and then do you float and you levitate and no, nothing happens really. You just remain the same old person with the same old quirks. The only difference is that you are okay with everything. There's some miracles that happens insidiously or quietly that nobody really notices, but you do. But one of the things that happens is that you continue to lead your life because there was prarabdha, there was a predefined life when you were born, and that continues. So you continue in this lifetime, but then when you die, you no longer exist as an individuated soul. You merge with the consciousness. It's not like you don't exist, you cease to exist. The example given in the scriptures is that if you are a drop of water, that water, when it hits a hot iron, it disintegrates, it evaporates, and that's exactly what happens to your soul in the journey of your life. Your soul then merges with the consciousness, and you are no longer limited or bound by your karmas, or many lifetimes of karmas. Is that okay?
Going back to Krishna. Going back to
Cosmic. Yeah, so they say the same thing. It's just that you see, if you say because thank you, if you say it goes back to Krishna, that's a sort of simplistic way of understanding it. But I didn't buy that argument because I was stubborn. But yes, I wanted. I remember the last time I was a kid. I think I was about 19 years old, and I went to one of these Hare Krishna temples in Washington, and I was really wanting to know. I'd studied quite a bit. I went to a convent in my elementary education, and so I studied the Bible, the Quran, the Zoroastrian, the Baha'i, and I knew all the different sects of Islam, and also Buddhism and all that. And so I was. So finally, I said, "Oh yeah, here's a Swami. He's a scholar, and let me ask him about who created God, because this whole God business is not very nice." And he said, "Krishna." I'm like, "Okay." "Who created Krishna?" "Krishna." I'm like, "Okay." That was the last day I walked into a temple for many years. I was done. I mean, if there was something that put me off, that was it. Because I thought I was meeting a scholar of our tradition, and until, of course, the next Swami I met was my guru, and then he kind of roped me in. So I'm getting the karmas of, all the Swamis I avoided and mistreated. It's coming back to me now. So, yeah. And I'm okay with it. Yeah. Any last question before we wrap up?
I
Yeah.
guess I kind of have a question on
Sure.
that note. So do you not come back? Do you not get a choice to come back into the human form again once you've reached that oneness? If the soul doesn't evaporate, so not that consciousness isn't the most amazing, blissful place to be. Is there no longer awareness of this matter and energy?
Right. So the assumption is, because we have no way to validate that except for the scriptures, right? So the scriptures tells us exactly what it is, and I probably will go more into that tomorrow about why do we find this set of scriptures valid. Assumption is that, one. The second is assumption is that you actually understand it, because we think we know many times, and we don't know that we really don't know, but So, but assuming that we do, and you're a Jivan Mukta, as she pointed out, then based on these assumptions, because we have no evidence to do it, and there is a reason why we take it to be true, but based on those assumptions, we can say that, yes, I will cease to exist when I die, because my soul will merge into the cosmos. Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you so much for your attention, and I hope this was useful for you, and hopefully see some of you tomorrow. Thank you. Have a great evening.